The girl walking. Something weird happened to me 3 days ago when I was driving home from work. I work in the city, but I live in the country, or buttfuck nowhere. My closest neighbor lives at least a mile away. The road I take is a small country road with no street lights or traffic lights. It can be very dark, so dark in fact that when a deer runs across the road, it's barely a flash. There are no sidewalks, only thick forest on both sides. And that's what was weird about the whole situation. I was about 30 minutes away from home when I saw it, or her. I'm not really sure what I think now. Anyway, I was driving and saw a girl walking down this dark country road, and it was way out of place. I don't ever pick up strangers, but it was a girl my age, and all she was wearing was a t-shirt and what looked to be scrub suit bottoms, like the uniforms healthcare workers wear. I know I shouldn't have stopped, but I did. The worst thing I've ever done in my 33 years of life. I stopped and cracked my window about 3 inches and asked, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She replied,
"Yes, please. My car broke down, and I'm cold and tired."
I asked her where she was headed, and I could drive her 25 miles, then we can part ways. She replied,
"Thank you so much. I can pay you."
I said no, it's okay. I have to drive the distance anyway. She smiled and got in. I took off, and after about 6 or 7 minutes, she dozed off. Things were okay at first, but got very strange. After driving for what seemed like 15 minutes, I thought I saw the same girl walking down the road. It's dark, so I couldn't really tell at first, but as I passed the person walking, I could see the girl looked like the girl I just picked up. As I passed the person, they looked in my direction and gave a half smile, and it made me feel like the dark got darker. I looked over at my passenger as she made a gurgling sound. She opened her eyes and smiled at me and said,
"Sorry for falling asleep. I'm just so tired."
I said it was okay, and I told her I saw a person that resembled her and asked if she had a sister. She said no,
"No,
she was
I'm
by
by
herself,
myself."
so I shrugged it off and kept driving. I should have made it to the city limit by now, but my drive seemed longer than normal. Just as I had my thought, I seen a figure up the road, so I turned slightly to my right and asked my passenger if she sees somebody up the street. She said no, I
"I
don't
don't
see
see
anything.
anything."
As we get closer, I can see it's the girl again. I turned slightly to ask again if she can see the girl, but when I turned I noticed there was nobody in the passenger seat. I slowed down as I passed the girl, and she looked at me and smiled with a grin that went from ear to ear, and her eyes were glowing. It was the same girl that I picked up, and the same girl I saw walking. I stepped on the gas and accelerated to about 70 miles per hour, trying to make it home and out of this darkness. 20 minutes go by, and I still haven't reached the city limit. Instead, I'm back to where I started when I picked the girl up. And again, I see a figure of the road, but I keep driving. I pass the girl, she turns, she smiles again. I think she's laughing at me. Now, speed up to 100 miles per hour, and I'm not stopping for anyone. Finally, after seeing the 3 girls 3 more times, I make it out of the darkness, and I can see the countryside. I slowed down to 55 and didn't stop until I made it home. I ran into my house and fumbled with the lock at first, but managed to turn the deadbolt. I dropped to my knees and bawled into my hands. For the last few days, I've been a living wreck. I can't talk to anyone because they'll just think I am fucking crazy. And who would blame you? It sounds crazy. All I know is I saw what I saw, so I am posting it here because I need to get it out. Now, using hindsight, I realized how stupid I was. I didn't even see a breakdown on the road. And how the fuck was she supposed to pay me anything? She wasn't wearing anything with pockets. I have to drive to work now. I'll update you when I get home. Wish me luck.
Story 2.
My name is Jake, and no, not from State Farm. I have a story to tell. I have never spoken a word of this to anyone. I am an avid hiker and camper. I have never been afraid of being in the woods by myself, but that will all change. Me and my wife frequently visit the Potawatomi Trail in Pinckney, Michigan. It is a 17-mile loop trail. It has an overnight camp about halfway in. Me and my wife love to spend the night, at least twice a year. This season, I wanted to go for an overnight hike. But my wife wasn't feeling well. This was during the COVID pandemic. She didn't mind me going by myself. She knows the trail, and she knows where I'll be. I pulled up to the trailhead on a beautiful Friday mid-morning. I got out of my Jeep Liberty and did a checklist for my pack. I pulled out my trekking poles and headed down the trail, finished the first 7 miles in a breeze. I reached my site with plenty of daylight left. The first thing I set up was our 2-person backpacker tent, and then I inflated my sleeping pad and pillow. I unrolled my sleeping bag and set up my Coleman LED lantern for later. I unpacked my chair and set it down by the lake. As I'm relaxing by the water, with a nice warm Modelo, I thought to myself, there are no other hikers, maybe they will show up later. The Potawatomi Trail is a hot spot and there are always bikers, hikers, and campers. After finishing my warm beer, I headed back up to camp to make dinner. I unpacked my jet boil and boiled some water for my dehydrated camping meal. I had lasagna, and it was fantastic. It's going on 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I'm still the only one here. I have to be honest, it was getting a little unnerving. As the sun set, I climbed into my tent and turned on my lantern. I dug out my phone to call my wife, to say goodnight and that I love her. After we spoke, it made me feel a little better, because it was extremely quiet. If you've ever been in the woods, you know there are always sounds. But I didn't even hear a cricket rubbing legs. I guess I eventually fell asleep, because I was awakened by an awful putrid, musty smell that nearly turned my stomach. I was snatched to attention by heavy footsteps walking in the direction of my tent. In between the heavy footsteps, I could hear what sounded like many other smaller steps from multiple smaller animals, walking all around my tent. Something was breathing heavy, like a Shire horse. It sounded like I had no chance of defending myself against whatever is out there, and there is nothing between me and it but a flimsy tent. After 15 minutes of whatever was walking around my tent finally left, I could still smell it. Actually, it was probably me I could smell, because I nearly shit myself. After I got a grip and calmed myself down, I thought, it's probably just hikers setting up camp late. In my backpacker tent, there are no mesh windows like on other tents, so I have to unzip to take a look. I got out of my tent to take a look around. It wasn't dark because there was a full moon this night. As I was looking, I saw hoof prints all around my tent, hundreds of them. They were everywhere. Just then, I heard something moving about in the thicket to my left. I turned around and dove into my tent like it was a battlefield. I zipped it up, but not all the way because I needed to see what was out there. The heavy steps and lighter steps are in the distance, but are moving closer. That smell is back too, and this time it isn't me. It smells like rotting decay and must. I had to hold my breath as I took a peek. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to witness. There were hundreds of deer, all around the campground. I mean, they were everywhere. One buck turned its head and looked at me. We connected eyes for a few seconds. Then it let out these horrendous barking noises that nearly deafened me. The only thing I have to defend myself is a fucking trekking pole and pocket knife. I start to pray that they go away and don't attack me because this tent isn't going to stop. Hundreds of razor-sharp antlers. What do these fucking things want with me? Why are they here? I have never been so scared in my life. Just when I think it can't get any worse, I see a hand. A huge fucking hand with claws longer than my fingers. It reached out and touched my tent, and the whole thing shook. I just want to be home. Just as I start to cry like a little bitch, everything went silent. I think they're gone. I wait and listen for 20 to 30 more minutes to make sure nothing comes back, because I'm getting the hell out of here. Since I was in a two-person tent, I had most of my things inside with me, so I packed up the little things I had into my bag and burst out of the tent like a madman and started running like hell down this pitch-black trail and a small flashlight. After running for nearly 2 miles and out of breath, I get an eerie feeling that came over me, almost like someone turned on the air conditioner, so I stopped. I shined the light all around me 360 degrees and didn't see anything, but heard something behind me, so I turned around to my left. Into my horror, the deer are back and they are up close and personal. I started backing up slowly because I don't want these things to attack me. They started making that barking noise again. It was so loud that I had to cover my ears. Just then, the biggest buck I have ever seen was walking towards me. It was huge. It looked like an elk. But I know we didn't have elk in Michigan. All the other smaller deer moved to the side as it approached me. I couldn't move, like my feet were nailed to the ground. I could just look in horror. The closer it got, the more I noticed its eyes. Something was wrong. Its eyes didn't sit on the side of its head, like a normal deer. They were in front of his head like a predator. The way it looked at me sent chills up my spine. It almost seemed human the way it just stared at me. Its front legs weren't quite right either. They looked more like well-toned arms, with hands and claws rather than hooves. It was now about 5 feet in front of me. Its antlers were humongous. They must have been 16 points. It looked like they had human flesh caught in them with clothing. It smelled like death. The thing stood up on its hind legs like a man. Under its fur were rippling muscles. It must have stood 10 feet. I had an overwhelming sense of calm come over me. I wasn't scared anymore. I felt more exhausted and tired than afraid. It opened its mouth, revealing sharp mangled teeth, but I wasn't afraid, just in a trance-like state. It moved its mouth like it was saying something, but I couldn't understand at first. Then I heard it like it was in my head. It said,
"You are pure."
It got back on all four, and just walked in the woods and disappeared, and the other deer followed. I must have passed out or something, because the next thing I remember is waking up on the trail. I must have fallen on something hard in my bag, because it felt like I broke a few ribs. I made my way to the trailhead and got to my Jeep. I tore out of the parking lot so fast that I nearly hit a tree on the way out. I saw on the news a few days later that a hiker was badly mangled on the trail. The reporter said that it looked like something grabbed him by the legs and smashed him against every tree in sight, then threw him like a rag doll. They found him in a tree 20 feet off the ground. In there were 2 other hikers as well. I consider myself lucky, and I will never camp alone again.